In this section, configuring ADFS with RSSO, we're going to go through the importing of the metadata of ADFS. To do that, we'll edit our realm, go to Authentication, and select SAML. Once we're on the configuration page, we'll go to Imports, and here we have two options: import from URL or import from local file. We'll give it the URL to the ADFS metadata. RSSO will go directly to the ADFS server to get the metadata of the identity provider. The URL will almost certainly look a bit like this, but confirm this with your ADFS admins, where we have HTTPS, then ADFS server name, Federation metadata 2007-06, and then Federation metadata.xml file. This is the option we're going to be using. However, in some environments, ADFS metadata is not published and you cannot get to it directly. So we have the option to import from local file. Here, the ADFS administrator has to send you the metadata XML. Once they've done that, we'll go to choose file and you go to the location of the XML metadata. So if we go back to import from URL, we'll do that. In this environment, the metadata for ADFS is published, so it's accessible. If I open up Internet Explorer and paste in the URL, you can see this is the ADFS metadata. Let's go back to RSSO and we'll paste in our URL and choose Import. So now RSSO goes to the ADFS server, picks up the metadata and fills out all of these fields here: IDP entity ID, login URL, logout response URL. Generally, we won't need to make any changes to this portion. And also here we have our IDP signing certificate, and we need to fill out the user ID attribute. By default on ADFS, which is using Active Directory, our user attribute is SAM account name. For the moment, we won't need to change user ID transformation, but if your users are coming back in a format that is, for example, user@email address.domain, then we can use the name ID drop down to remove either the domain or the email address, depending in which format your users are in the application that you're trying to log into. For example, in AR server, some users are just username, but ADFS and Active Directory will send username at email address, so we can remove the email domain. In this instance, we won't need to do that. Here we've got our name ID format. These other fields at this point in time we won't fill out. Underneath this video there'll be a description of what these fields are and how and when to use them. The sign request option here, sometimes when you are importing the ADFS metadata, this is not checked because that information is not in the ADFS metadata. So you will need to confirm with your ADFS admin if the request to ADFS needs signing. If it does, then check this option. We will leave everything else default at the moment. When we're done, we hit save. We'll go back to the ADFS authentication and we'll select the view metadata, which is the service provider's metadata. If you were following this blog from the beginning, earlier we created the relaying party trust where we gave this URL. So let's have a quick look at that on the ADFS side. We'll go to our ADFS server, go to ADFS admin. Again, if you're following along with this blog, you would have seen earlier that we created this RSSO ADFS relaying party. We have a red crosshair which indicates that the connection to the service provider, in this case RSSO, was not successful. That is because we hadn't created the service provider metadata yet. So let's resolve that quickly. Right click on the relaying party trust properties. And here is our relaying party trust federation metadata URL. This test URL function was failing before, again because we didn't have the RSSO metadata configured. And now if we do a test URL, Federation metadata URL has now validated successfully. We OK on that. And let's update from Federation metadata and do an update here. And now there's a successful connection between ADFS and RSSO. That concludes this section. Our next step is to test ADFS authentication.